Randy Weingarten, can school districts sort of use a high degree of localism and figure out what works best for them, or are we in a world where it's best to take state guidelines or even national guidelines on how to approach English language proficiency?
Well, this is the question of the day on English language proficiency. It's the question on the day on literacy, and it's the question on the day on math, social studies, and so you've just hit the question of the day. There's a balance here, meaning there has to, we in this country are deeply federalist, meaning we believe in local autonomy, but at the same time, we know that if we're going to help all kids achieve, and if we're going to not let other countries outcompete us, we need to focus on what we're doing in every single classroom in terms of what kids need to know and be able to do. The issue, what's interesting to me about the evolution in terms of how we address English language learners is that what has become more of the norm is giving the choice to parents in terms of what kind of program parents want. But the conflict is that when you don't have the resources in a school district, or when you have particularly like a small school district where you may have one or two kids who really need a bilingual program or whose parents really want it, then you have one or two kids whose parents want a different kind of LEP program. So how does the school district adjust to make sure that those resources are given to kids? In a place like New York City, it's actually easier because we have so many schools and now so many dual language programs. So you can have the Zhangwan Academy in Chinatown, which is a terrific dual language school, and where you can actually parents can figure out how to get their kids to that school. But I think what's happened is that this is where the resource question, the data question, and the local autonomy question almost crash and burn together. Ultimately, you need the federal regulations to say, we must do this. We must help all kids. But you also have to have enough resources so that you have that teacher who has proficiency in helping a child who's an English language learner.
Bibi Otero, there's a lot of appeal to the notion, oh, well, of course, local democracy. Ask the parents what they want. Let's make our decisions here in the neighborhood. Does that really work?
I really would like to see the dialogue around language learning to move beyond that of immigrant children and to the mainstream. I think that the dialogue of language learning needs to be about what is it that all of our kids across the country need in order to excel in a global society. And one of those things is language proficiency in a number of languages. And so if we can move bilingual education from this is how we're helping immigrant children or second language learners learn English, but rather this is how we're helping all of our children compete in a world where they may need to know Spanish or Arabic or Chinese or whatever, then you have both an issue of parent choice in terms of where they'd like to see their children, and you have an issue of resources going across the board to everyone and not to one group.
But is that a question of good pedagogy, good teaching and learning, or a question of strategy, giving everybody a stake in the debate where they may not perceive they have one now?
I think it's both. I think it's a policy issue. If this country wants to be able to have the kind of language diversity it needs for, it's a national security issue. I think it's an economic issue. It's definitely a programmatic issue. How can we do it? What are the best possible programs and strategies? And it's obviously an implementation issue and a teacher preparation issue. And so when we look at it as a global piece and say what aspect of that is a federal decision, what aspect is a state decision, what aspect is a parent decision, I think if we move the dialogue, and as immigrants, we should push that the dialogue be moved away from simply that of teaching children a second language that is becoming Americanized by learning English. We are as Americanized by having two languages as we are by having one.
It's now time for a break. We'll continue this discussion when we come back. Today, those who fought to establish the current system in the 70s are now worried about the future of bilingual education after states like California and Arizona now require all public schools to teach all classes in English, and other states are considering similar measures. We'll discuss this in a moment. Ron Blackburn, Herman Badillo has evolved in his view of bilingual ed. Has Aspira?
Well, fundamentally, no, we haven't. We still sustain that if you have a well-implemented, well-thought-through bilingual education program, you do three things. You're able to let the student learn English, which is critically important. Second, to learn content at the same time. It would be extremely difficult for me to take a chemistry course in German. And the third is language retention, which is what we were talking about just a minute ago. This third piece is very, very important. English immersion has shown, in many cases, to be effective. In most cases, not. And I think that bilingual education, when I say bilingual education, well-implemented bilingual education programs, I mean you have to have a program that's integrated into the reform in the school. It's not isolated, which has its tend to be. You have to have the resources, including the teachers and the support resources. And finally, the will. And I think that No Child Left Behind is providing a sense that in schools that they have to provide for these students. And they're looking for answers to these questions for the first time. So the transition is important, obviously, and I don't believe that students should remain in bilingual education for 7 or 8 years. The consent decree calls for a 3-year period. But the fundamental issue of language acquisition, content learning, and retention of native language is still fundamentally the same as it was in the 70s.
Don Soifer, you heard the former congressman talk about taking too long to transition. And some of the people on our panel have been talking about bilingual ed in an idealistic and best practices way. What do we know about what real kids do in America? Do they spend a long time transitioning? Do they spend too long transitioning?
Well, we heard Congressman Badillo talk about 6 to 8 years, and Aspira talks about 3 years. The reality in California is that less than 10% of English learners transition to English proficiency in any given year, so we're talking about an average more than 10 years. Now, the change that's happened in California doesn't look, you walk into a classroom in California, it doesn't look like what you would expect if you were to read Proposition 227, but it has started a dialogue, a real meaningful dialogue, in every school district that I've looked at, of how to really improve results so the kids are not just learning English, but how the kids are just learning, period. And questions like coping with linguistic isolation have become part of the mainstream education dialogue in California. And although the results have a long way to go, the individual results for each kid matters. Prior to 2001, many states didn't even have a uniform definition of what an English learner was, which made data impossible to gather or measure. I think we've made strides not just since Congressman Badillo's results, but even since 2001, and we're moving in the right direction, but we have a long way to go.
Well, just a few moments ago, you heard Ron say that English immersion doesn't work. What do you say?
Well, we're seeing the evolution of good, new, structured programs where kids are taught in the structured English immersion program. They're taught initially in English, but with constant support from teachers in their native language, in strategies that are focused on providing early English proficiency and before a kid falls behind. And those programs are starting to work in ways that some of the programs that we discussed at the beginning of the show never did.